In Greek mythology, Hades is the brother of Zeus and Poseidon. The three brothers were the sons of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and they overthrew their father to become the ruling gods of the universe. Hades was given the underworld as his domain, where he ruled over the dead. He was often depicted as a stern and unyielding god, but also as a just ruler who fairly judged the souls of the dead. Hades is not often described in detail in terms of his physical appearance. However, he is often depicted as a powerful and imposing figure. He is usually shown as being tall and muscular, with a strong and commanding presence. He is often depicted with a dark and gloomy appearance, with black clothing or armor, representing his association with the underworld. He is also often depicted with a helmet that makes him invisible, which adds to his mysterious and ominous reputation. In art and sculpture, Hades is often depicted as a mature man with a serious and stern expression, with a dark beard and long hair, which can be either black or dark brown. He is also often depicted with symbols of death, such as a scythe or a skull. Despite his fearsome reputation, Hades was not necessarily viewed as an evil deity. In fact, many myths portrayed him as a sympathetic figure who was simply fulfilling his duty as the ruler of the underworld. In addition to these myths, Hades is also known to be a solitary figure. He is not often involved in the conflicts of the other Olympians and is rarely depicted as interacting with them. Hades' relationship with his brothers Zeus and Poseidon was generally peaceful, but there were a few instances of tension and conflict between them. In Greek mythology, there are several instances of conflict between Hades and his siblings Zeus and Poseidon. One reason for this conflict is that the three brothers had different domains of power. Zeus was the ruler of the sky and the gods, Poseidon was the ruler of the sea, and Hades was the ruler of the underworld. This division of power could have led to competition and disputes between the brothers. Another reason for conflict is the way they obtained their power. The three brothers, along with their sisters, overthrew their father Cronus, who had swallowed all of his children as soon as they were born, in order to prevent any of them from overthrowing him. The brothers drew lots to decide who would rule over which realm, and Hades drew the underworld. This may have led to some resentment from his brothers, who may have thought he got the worst realm, and it also may have led to competition for power among the brothers. Additionally, in one myth, Hades kidnapped Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, and Zeus and Poseidon had to intervene to negotiate her release. This act of kidnapping caused conflicts between Hades and the rest of the Olympian gods, especially with Demeter. Hades kidnapped Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, because he had fallen in love with her and wanted her to be his queen in the underworld. The myth goes that Persephone was out picking flowers with some nymphs when Hades, disguised as a dark cloud, burst out of the ground and seized her. He then took her to the underworld, where he made her his bride and the queen of the dead. Demeter, Persephone's mother and the goddess of the harvest, was devastated by the loss of her daughter and searched the earth for her. In her grief, she caused the crops to wither and die, leading to a great famine. The other gods and goddesses intervened, and Zeus, the king of the gods, forced Hades to return Persephone to her mother. However, Persephone had already eaten pomegranate seeds in the underworld, which bound her to it. As a result, it was decided that Persephone would spend half of the year with her mother and the other half with Hades in the underworld. This is the mythological explanation for the changing of the seasons, with Demeter's joy at having her daughter with her causing the growth of plants in the warm summer, and her sadness and mourning during the time Persephone is in the underworld causing the death of plants and the cold winter. In this story, Hades' actions were driven by his love for Persephone and his desire to have her by his side in the underworld. However, his actions were seen as a violation of the natural order and caused great grief and suffering for Demeter and the rest of the world. The feelings of Persephone towards Hades are not entirely clear. In some versions of the myth, Persephone is portrayed as being unwilling or resistant to Hades' advances, and is kidnapped and taken to the underworld against her will. In others, she is shown as being more passive, and may not have put up much of a struggle against Hades. There are also variations that suggest that Persephone may have had some level of affection for Hades, either before or after her abduction. Some versions of the myth suggest that Persephone was fascinated by the underworld and its ruler, and that she was not completely unwilling to go with him. Others suggest that over time, Persephone came to love Hades and was content to be his queen in the underworld. It's also worth noting that in some versions of the myth, Persephone is also portrayed as being a more active participant in her own fate, in which she chooses to stay with Hades in the underworld, and is not necessarily an unwilling victim. It's important to note that while there were conflicts between Hades and his brothers, they were still considered a family, and they were all part of the powerful Olympian gods. The conflicts were usually resolved through negotiations or mediation, and they always returned to a peaceful coexistence. However, it is important to remember that these myths were written a long time ago, and they reflect the culture, beliefs and values of the society that created them. The feelings of the characters in the myths are not always clear and consistent across different versions. One reason people may have had a negative view of Hades is because of his association with the underworld and death. In ancient cultures, death was often viewed as a fearful and ominous occurrence, and the god associated with it may have been seen in a similar light. Additionally, Hades was often depicted as stern and unyielding, which may have contributed to his negative reputation. He is the ruler of the underworld, which is a place of punishment for the souls of the dead, which also make people fear him. Furthermore, the fact that he was the ruler of the dead and the underworld, a place where people go after they die, and he would decide their fate, also made people uncomfortable. It's worth noting that the ancient Greeks themselves had a complex relationship with death and the afterlife, and this is likely reflected in their perceptions of Hades. While some myths portray him as a just ruler, others depict him as a kidnapper and violator of the natural order of things. It's also important to remember that myths and legends are often shaped by the culture and beliefs of the people who created them. The ancient Greeks' view of Hades may not necessarily reflect how people view death and the afterlife today.